Hey guys, my name's Emily Condon, and I did my presentation on constitutional rights within disaster policies because I want to be a constitutional lawyer when I'm older, and I thought it would be an interesting topic to explore. This is a quick overview of the Constitution. The Constitution established the national government and foundational laws, instituted checks and balances, and guaranteed basic and essential rights and freedoms for the individual citizen. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, which secures inalienable rights such as freedom of speech, due process, etc. The Constitution established the federal system, aka federalism, in which powers are shared or designated amongst the levels of government, local, state, and federal. As a case study of constitutional rights in disaster situations, Hurricane Katrina could be seen as a violation of them. There were Second Amendment violations that took form in the confiscation of guns during post-Katrina looting and recovery. In order to prevent serious crime in addition to looting, Police Superintendent Eddie Compass announced on September 8, 2005, no one will be allowed to have guns. Guns will be taken. Only law enforcement will be allowed to have guns. The NRA filed a lawsuit against New Orleans officials that they improperly seized guns, deprived citizens of property and liberty without due process of the law. The NRA stands that within the societal breakdown, citizens are left to defend and protect themselves. In the 2006 regular session of the Louisiana legislature, Steve Scalise passed the law backed by the NRA that prohibits the seizure and confiscation of firearms during an emergency or disaster. This photo goes along with the idea that many citizens felt that they were not being protected by law enforcement agencies, and they took it in their own hands to protect themselves. To continue with the discussion of Hurricane Katrina, law professor James P. Rogers argues that modern interpretations of the Third Amendment, that no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law, that would beg that during Katrina, the National Guard violated this particular amendment. National Guardsmen took private spaces like hospitals, hotels, and golf clubs to house themselves. In one case, as noted above, National Guard troops in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina were living in a golf course clubhouse, wearing clothes stolen from the pro shop. While residing in the pro shop constitutes quartering, it is unclear whether wearing the clothes from the shop also constitutes quartering. So what constitutes quartering is the fact that the National Guard is working and living within these private spaces at the expense of the owner. The Stafford Act or disaster policy. The Stafford Act is the primary disaster relief statute authorizing the president to deploy the military for disaster relief upon the request of a state governor. Emergency and disaster declarations must come from the governor of the affected state, but the president can declare an emergency if they decide that the emergency implicates interests for which the United States exercises exclusive or preeminent responsibility. When a disaster emergency far extends the capacity of local state government, following the request of a governor, the president can invoke the Insurrection Act, which sends in federal troops. As a note, President Bush offered the Louisiana governor during Hurricane Katrina to enact the Insurrection Act, but the governor rejected this offer. Under the Stafford Act, the military can assist and supplement the existing local and state resources in humanitarian or logistical aid. This policy does not enable the military to restore or maintain order by arrests, seizures, or by acting through law enforcement procedures. The State National Guard is not tied under these same restrictions. Martial law is a system of complete control by a country's military over all activities, including civilian, in a theoretical or actual war zone during a period of emergency caused by a disaster such as earthquake or flood, with the military commander having dictatorial powers. Under martial law, constitutional rights may be suspended or limited. Going along with the Stafford Act, the federal government is limited in their involvement in state disasters and emergencies, only sends in military troops after a sober assessment of the needs presented, as military deployment to maintain public order, raising questions of the boundaries of federalism that could impose a martial law. Japanese internment during World War II can be seen as an act of martial law. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japanese military in December of 1941, the systematic internment of Japanese Americans took place by Executive Order 9066. This gave extreme power to the military. Military zones were established along Pacific states, California, Washington, and Arizona, by the Department of War. These particular states had a very large Japanese demographic. This designation allowed the Department of War to exclude certain peoples from it. In this instance, it was peoples of Japanese descent. Japanese Americans were forced to evacuate by National Relocation Authority. By definition, this is an act of martial law in which the military is subjecting people to their rule and will. During the time of internment, Japanese Americans were detained without trial and without committing a crime, solely based on the assumption that it was necessary for national security. Interestingly, no person of Japanese ancestry living in the U.S. was ever convicted of any serious act of espionage or sabotage during World War II. Constitutionally, citizens are given the right to a fair and speedy trial and the right to confront their accuser. This is known as due process. The Fifth Amendment states, "No one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law," and this applies to the federal government. The 14th Amendment includes the same exact wording, but it is known as the Due Process Clause, which extends over the state and local governments. For Japanese Americans during this period, due process, such as having probable cause or a trial or the right to face your accuser, was suspended, and their constitutional right to due process was unsatisfied under martial law. In Hawaii, General DeWitt proclaimed military necessity to evacuate many citizens of Hawaii, most of them being of Japanese ancestry, in which he seized weapons, ammunition, radios, and cameras without warrants. This, of course, violates the Constitution's protected right against unreasonable searches and seizures. Additionally, this is considered martial law. On the left, we have a photo of General DeWitt, the military general who ordered Hawaii to be under martial law. On the right, we have a woman posing in front of a sign in her house with a racist sentiment declaring her neighborhood a white neighborhood. The wartime hysteria and an already existent anti-Japanese sentiment led to blame-seeking by many Americans. In conclusion, your constitutional rights are those that cannot be infringed upon, but as we have seen, the government weighs the rights of an individual with the needs of the plenty in a disaster situation. If you understand your constitutional rights, you will be able to tell if there are serious abuses of power.